Hey, welcome back to Nightshift with Andrea Up Late. This is a true crime podcast, and as always, I am joined by my lovely, handsome co-host, BC Sanders. BC, how you doing?
Oh, I'm wonderful now.
Okay.
Dropping a compliment like that.
I do that every now and then. What is this, the third Tuesday of the month? That's when that happens.
Yes.
We got some friends in the chats. I see. If you are new to Night Shift, this is, like I said, a true crime podcast. We air live every week on YouTube on the Andrea Up Late channel, usually at 8/7 Central, sometimes a few minutes before or after, but we let you know ahead of time. You can follow me on Andrea Up Late on Instagram, and then you can listen to all of these shows wherever you stream your podcasts. So if you happen to be in the YouTube chats right now, we would like to say hello to you. And if you are not, then just hop on in. It's free. You log into YouTube. Takes nothing but an email. And then you can hop in the chats and talk to us. Ask some questions about the cases. Interact. We kind of have a little fun usually after the show and sit back and chit chat with everybody. So welcome. We'd love to have you. And I think we can go on and get started here in a second. So tonight, you guys, we haven't done this in a little while. Every now and then you guys kind of say that you want something a little different. And tonight we're doing that. So we've covered these types of things before. In fact, we've covered a couple of these specific cases before. But overall, it's the idea of missing people in national parks. Okay? So we know that between animals, injury, disorientation, sadly, suicide. There are quite a few reasons why people can go missing in somewhere like a national park, right? That makes perfect sense. But some cases are a bit different and don't make any sense whatsoever. And so we're going to cover some of those. For those of you that don't know, BC Sanders is a retired homicide lieutenant. So when it comes to talking about things like investigations, searches, the scene, different things like that, talking to and interviewing witnesses and those kinds of things. He is a wealth of knowledge there. So it's always great to have his opinion on these kinds of things and his input. So the case that we are covering first tonight, like I said, we're going to go over 3 or 4 kind of small cases. And the first one occurred in the year 1969. Now, if you are a Night Shift watcher or listener, you know that we like to cover pop culture, crime, music, current events in the year of the year that the case takes place that we're talking about that evening. So tonight, like I said, 1969, that was quite a hopping year. A lot of things going on, BC. So I feel like this should be like a Norm Macdonald news desk. Like I need to put some music in where it's like, bah, 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 and it like goes to you to give all the pop culture news. We got David J in the chat saying Summer of 69. You actually your second favorite song. So let's get started with that.
No. That are you making the Bryan Adams reference? And if so, stop it now. Nobody wants to talk about Bryan Adams. But in 1969, another not so good musicians.
You need to be careful. You're going to exclude most of our listeners with your very opinionated.
I bet you there are more people who don't like Bryan Adams that listen to you than do.
Okay, whatever.
I will say that. I do believe that. Now, most people want to fight me on my opinion of the Beatles, so I'll keep it to myself. But 1969, according to history books, Abbey Road was recorded.
Okay.
I think that was like some album they did.
Look, your camp is always no Beatles any of the time. I'm a fan of later Beatles. I don't prefer early days Beatles, but I like some of the I like the later days Beatles stuff. You guys let me know what you're thinking in the chats if you're listening about this. Yeah, go ahead. What you got?
The Godfather novel hit newsstands.
Oh, I had no idea. I don't think I had a frame of reference for a year for that.
I didn't either. I remember watching the first one and the second one. The movies, The Godfather. I never read the book, but I was told it was really good. Some say we landed on the moon in 1969. Now, when we were younger, we would have been like, yo, 1969, landed on the moon. But now, some people making some pretty good arguments.
Yeah, I don't get behind a lot of the old school. I guess, we've kind of joked that like the new school conspiracy theories aren't actually conspiracy theories. It's just stuff that other people don't really want to believe. But like the old school ones, I'm not always like in camp with all of those. But when it comes to the moon landing, as much as I love it and I love the idea of it and I always was fully behind it, we talk about being a skeptic. I can't say that I'm not interested to look at both sides of that one.
Yeah. We watched.
That's what I was going to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Andrea and I watched some footage of, it was like a debrief or like
yeah, basically. Well, it was like an AAR type, an after interview.
Yeah.
Well, it was the media.
The media were interviewing astronauts. I mean, it
was the three of them
that landed on the moon, and they just didn't seem one like they had actually landed on another piece of matter floating in space.
My teenager looks more excited if I want to ask him about math that day than they did asked about. They looked not only nonplussed, they looked I like that word.
I love when you use that word.
But they looked almost, if you haven't, guys, Google the footage of them being interviewed after they landed, because they look not only, like I said, like just disinterested, almost irritated, irritated to even have to be there for it. I don't know. It just, all the excitement that the country had, like even if they were exhausted, people put on a face that adrenaline carries you forward. They would be answering and excited, it's weird. Y'all watch that and come back to me, and maybe we could do a show on that one night. But
that when we watched that, I was like, whoa. I mean, they were astronauts, pilots before that, and they were at the pinnacle of everyone in that field. And they
the space
just
race
seemed like they were frustrated, like mad that they had to talk about it almost.
They wouldn't. I think that's what it was, and then we can move along. But I think they said something, because we were both like, oh, did you pick up on that? There was like some verbiage where it was like neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't say specifically what they did. Oh, they said some say that. Some would say that.
Yes.
Or something like that. It was like it never came out of their mouths that they did this thing. I don't know. It's interesting. Check it out for sure. Okay, so we may or may not have landed on the moon in 1969. Is what you're saying.
Right. Okay. Woodstock was in 1969.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to bring up that Jefferson Airplane played Woodstock. The same band that would later be called Starship and sing an 80s hit called We Built This City.
The only reason I didn't say it out loud is because it's the only song I'm going to now sing until I go to bed tonight.
Yeah. I just am always amazed that a band that goes from sounding like they did to sounding like that. It's just interesting. I'm not trying to be mean.
We built this city on rock and roll.
That's one of the worst songs ever. It really is.
It's like the slow drum synthesizer.
It's just a commercial. It sounds like a commercial
for Radio Shack.
Yeah. Radio Shack.
I think.
Okay. Man, I forgot about Radio Shack.
Glorious.
Yes. Oh, well, speaking of Radio Shack, the internet was invented in 1969.
I wonder to what capacity, or like to like big businesses. Like,
if I remember right, and I apologize, I didn't do as much research. If I remember right, I do believe the military had some capabilities.
Well, that would make sense,
that, right?
That's how they downloaded the footage from the moon.
That's true. Oh gosh! Again, the camera angles, everything. Okay, glue sticks were invented in 1969. Did you know that?
I didn't. In fact, I would think like rubber cement, like still like a stick paste situation.
Yeah. Oh,
or was it glue sticks for a hot glue gun?
Yeah, I bet when they invented the glue stick, they probably invented a hot glue gun.
Okay, hold up there,
What?
smarty pants.
No,
I thought you meant glue sticks that like children use in elementary schools.
I do, but I'm saying once they figured out how to make that cylinder, I bet
that's different than like the little hard cylinders of individual sticks of glue that melt in the hot glue gun.
I don't know what I'm saying now. I think glue sticks, as in like Elmer's glue sticks.
Right. So I'm saying, I wonder if it wasn't those in 1969 so much as the ones that would be used in like when women would use hot glue guns, because back then it would have been women using hot glue guns for like to fix things or craft things or whatever.
To be dazzled.
They didn't do that then.
Yeah. I have played with a hot glue gun when I was a kid and burned my fingers. But yeah, glue sticks I think is just a 1969 invention. They were always reminding me of little shotgun shells when I was a kid.
Do y'all understand what I'm saying? Y'all know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
You don't.
I do. That's all I've got for 1969. Other than that, probably would have been like the first full year that Crips were documented in LA. Other than that,
there might have been like a little conflict, like a war going on.
There was a war going on. The Tet Offensive, if I remember right, was 68. And so 69, Vietnam was still going. Like, yeah. Heavy fighting.
Wasn't Forrest Gump filmed in 1969?
I think so. Man.
Okay.
David
J says, I'm still stuck on moon landing conspiracy. Like in your brain or us talking about it? You got to watch that. If you have not, you have to watch that interview with those three guys.
I mean, that's more telling than watching the shaky footage.
It really is.
Yeah. I mean, I get the footage and all that too, but
when if you're a fan of this show, we talk about human behavior often. And so that's a really great kind of a textbook study in human behavior and kind of, Silly, I do what I can for the show.
Yeah, she said you're rocking the beach wave.
She did, which was sweet. I said, I'm straight out of the shower. But then she was like, straight out of the shower and back to makeup. That's commitment. It is. And I fuss about it every week. You should hear me saying, I hate putting this makeup on with gritted teeth as I'm doing it. So
also, I want to say,
it's true.
I'm trying to look at the camera, but my computer's a little bit lower. So when I look down to see the comments and to look by habit at you on here, I look like I'm asleep or Jimmy Kimmel or something. So
are you using that camera or that camera?
I'm using this big one up here. So anyway, I'm sorry. That's all I got on 1969. It was a lot.
We tricked them, David. That's why.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. What does it say? Bases. Yeah. Anyway, there is a theory that America was trying to bankrupt the Soviet Union with NASA, like saying we will be on the moon by the end of the decade. So for whatever
reason. So they try
reason.
so hard.
And then
meaning the Soviet Union.
Yes. And then so if I bring that up, what's the next story I would mention about the Soviet Union and space?
The pins. The space pins.
Yes.
Which then launches me into a Jerry Seinfeld skit, but you go ahead.
So the way the story goes, the Soviet Union were their cosmonauts. They and America were trying to invent instruments for outer space. The America invents the ink pen that can write in zero gravity. Oh, I'm sure they spent thousands and thousands of dollars on that.
That's big technology.
Yeah. Do you know how the Soviet Union solved the problem of writing and documenting data
upside down
space, upside down, floating?
How?
Pencil.
That's
the.
But was it the Soviet Union or the United States that first trademarked the pen that when you turn it upside down, the lady's clothes fall off?
That was my dad.
Because that's the
he
real
had that
winner.
pen when I was like
ding,
4
ding,
or 5 years old. Oh my gosh! I forgot about that.
That's the true winner right there, folks. Who cares about the space race?
Oh.
All right, let's get started, y'all. We're going to talk about 7-year-old Dennis Martin. In fact, Dennis turned 7 during the search for him, in fact. So Dennis, in June of 1969, was excited because he was taking a trip with his dad and his granddad and his brother and some other family friends and other little boys to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. If you're not aware, it's called like the Blue Ridge, the Smoky Mountains. They're called that because they have kind of a distinct bluish color to the actual mountains themselves. So that combined with the haze that you often see in mountains lend to like a bluish color in the distance when you look at them. Very beautiful. I lived there for a few years. And we're going to be talking about areas that basically span East Tennessee into Western North Carolina. So that's all the same mountain range there. All right. And that's where they were going, the Martin family, on a vacation. They did this every year. It was like a Father's Day vacation, and they would take the little boys and go hiking and camping and swimming in waterfalls and these kinds of things. And so Dennis was 6 at the time of this trip on June 14th and was super pumped. Like I said, he had not been able to go before. So they go out. With him was his 9-year-old brother, Doug, his dad, who was a Knoxville architect in Knoxville, Tennessee, Bill Martin, and his granddad, Clyde Martin. So they all spent the night in a place called Russell Field with this guy named Dr. Carter Martin of Huntsville, Alabama, and his 2 sons. So now you've got, like I said, brother, dad, granddad, family friend, couple extra kids. So on June 14th, the whole group went and hiked to a place called Spence Field. And they did this, and that doctor that was with them from Alabama, the family friend, he had multiple other family members there. So they hiked to Spence Field. They've kind of spent the day hiking. They actually go on to say that little Dennis at 6, did not seem to get bored or tired with the hike. He did a really good job. So about 3 p.m. that day on the 14th, the adults were just kind of chilling, watching the kids play. If you've ever gone for a hike, once you kind of get where you're going, you can just kind of, throw out your stuff, take a rest, put your feet up, maybe start a fire, go swimming, whatever. And that's kind of what they were doing, just enjoying their afternoon. So the adults noticed that the kids were kind of conspiring. You know how kids can be. And so they're kind of whispering and giggling. And the adults can kind of catch on that the kids are going to want to scare them. They're going to want to encircle them or jump out and yell boo. And as good dads and uncles and granddads, they sit quietly and let it play out. So the kids started to spread out. So Doug, Dennis's brother Doug, and the little boys that belonged to the doctor's family all went in kind of one direction. Now they kind of urged Dennis to go in a different direction because this day little Dennis was wearing a bright red shirt, and they thought that Dennis might, kind of give away their surprise, their prank. So they have him kind of go in a different direction. So all of a sudden, Doug, Dennis's brother, and the other children jump out. They yell boo, whatever they do to try to scare the adults. Everyone kind of, they're all giggling and laughing. Dennis doesn't immediately jump out. And so they just thought he was kind of a little, late on the uptake there. Maybe he got distracted with the bunny or, what have you. But 3, 4, 5 minutes go by, and finally they're like, okay, what's up? The adults immediately, within that few minutes span, stand up to walk around and try to find Dennis. Would you just text it?
Yeah, I got you.
So they all start looking around. They're not seeing Dennis initially. And so some time goes by. Immediately they start kind of to like gather other members of their party and other members there around the actually other campers that were there vacationing. And they all start looking. As you can imagine, there's when someone else that you're not, a stranger to you has a sense of urgency. So you're going to hear them yelling Dennis's name and very purposefully walking through this campground. So you've got a picture where it was. So this is an area called Cades Cove. This is where I took you to. So it's an 11-mile. You can, millions of tourists go there every year. If you've heard of Dollywood, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, these areas in East Tennessee, Cades Cove is a tourist destination, but it's just miles and miles. It's a huge acreage expanse of what was initially a town that no longer exists. Okay, it's like an abandoned town, but when I say town, it's mainly land, and you can drive a mile or two and then see an old cabin or an old church or barn in these different structures. It's actually an 11-mile paved loop, but within it, you've got elk, you have bears, you have, you can see the rolling hills, the mountains, around you. It's really, really gorgeous. But that said, it's, quite the terrain for a 6-year-old boy. You've got laurel brush and thickets and ravines. And like I said, big creeks and waterfalls and these kinds of things. So it's really good to know that when we talk about Dennis going missing there. So initially, they finally take the trails down and get to the actual guard station to ask for, remember guys, 1969, that's, even if you have a cell phone, to be fair, they don't work half the time out there, at all. We were just there in November, I guess. And I mean, your phones just don't work there. So the day that Dennis disappeared, there was a man named Harold Key. Okay. He was 45 years old at the time. He was from Tennessee, but he was there kind of vacationing with his family. He will say later that he heard, quote, an enormous, sickening scream. And a few minutes later, he says he noticed what he considered a rough-looking man moving quickly or stealthily, depending on the source, in the woods near where he had heard the scream. So he says, I thought he might have been a moonshiner. He thought he stumbled upon somebody who was trying to kind of get out of being caught doing something like that, completely unrelated. He didn't know anything about the lost boy. He was a few miles down, so he didn't know anything about Dennis or the search efforts that were just beginning to go underway for him. So he didn't report the incident or what he considers, his witness statement until many days later, after he'd actually gotten back home to Carthage, Tennessee, and heard about little missing Dennis Martin. He couldn't recall exactly what time it was it occurred, but he did go on and tell authorities about it. And evidently the park officials kind of discounted any likelihood of a connection there because of the distance between where Dennis was last seen and where he says that he heard this stuff or, whatever. So next thing you know, it's starting to get dark outside and thunder and lightning start to roll in. But real fast, before I get farther on that part, has anyone listening, or if you're in the chats, heard a mountain lion scream? If you haven't, let's see here. It's absolutely terrifying. And if you have never heard one, you may very well think that you're hearing a distressed human. So I'm going to play for you just so you can hear a little bit, so you have an idea. This is one example. They can sound a little different depending on where they are in relation to you or where they are in the woods, but okay. So if you're in the woods, first of all, people will say it's the one noise that nothing scares them more.
That's terrifying. Yeah.
So there have actually been plenty of accounts of people in the woods that will say they heard a woman screaming, and then you find out through trail cams and different things it was a mountain lion. That's not a scream you want to hear if you don't know much about wildlife in the area that you're at or these kinds of things. But so I'm not saying that this Martin Key did not hear Dennis scream. Also, he could have heard something like this, particularly where they were. So that's just something to keep in mind. Isn't that horrible?
That's terrible. I never would have thought that.
Yeah, it sounds like a woman in horrible distress.
Yeah.
It's horrifying. That combined with my very healthy fear of big cats not a good. Yeah. So that's kind of as we talk about the disappearance of Dennis Martin, that's kind of one thing to keep in mind is this idea where this Mr. Key, Harold Key, says his account about the man, the scream, etc. Okay. So like I said, thunder and lightning are starting to roll in as it's getting dark. I can't imagine the frustration and the fear of the family involved as you see this giant storms coming in as you're looking for this child. Again, he was 6 years old. So before you know it, over the course of that evening, almost 3 inches of rain fell. It was a washout. It rained again the next couple of days. It's kind of like this pattern, like of these storms would kind of roll in, subside, roll in, subside. And that's something you want to think about when you think about potential tracks that Dennis could be making if he were on foot walking, if he were trying to find his family. You're going to have these tracks kind of washed out, and then he might make more, and they're getting washed out again because this rain keeps coming. So each storm, like I said, would potentially demolish any new tracks, and they were just saying, they being the investigators ultimately, and then the park guides as well, that it just demolished everything. The rain washed away everything. So volunteers actually helped park rangers. There were college students, Boy Scouts, hunters, on and off duty firefighters, police, members of 57 different rescue squads from 4 different states, and military personnel. So this was going to wind up being the largest missing persons search case in East Tennessee forevermore. I think ultimately there wound up being like 1,400 people searching for this child. Yeah. So while on one hand, that is amazing, I'm going to get your opinion on this in a moment, or your facts on this in a moment. While on one hand, that's amazing when you look at the vast area that you're searching. We also know, and they'll say later, that they learned a lot from the search, and that maybe it's not best to call out every single helping hand right off the bat, because now you don't know what you're looking at. You've got so many footprints and broken twigs and branches, and I can only imagine what else. Are there any other things like that I'm not thinking about?
Because just from trying to manage the resources of that many people, and once they go through an area, everything is destroyed. Meaning, like you're saying, they're breaking branches, they're stepping over potential footprints. I mean, but everybody wants to help. So, and back then you would, it would be, we're going to need more and more and more bodies to be able to, basically back then you would get, arm's length. So your fingers are touching, and then you just walk and you search. But now, I mean, and I know we'll cover some other cases more current, but now technology allows for some other stuff that we can talk about later.
Sure. Yeah. So that's kind of how this goes. When they talk about military personnel, evidently just a few miles away in the Nattenhella Forest were a group of like special forces soldiers that were conducting some training missions. So they were like, hey guys, can y'all help? Right? So they come. Now, we know that people like to make things a bit more salacious than they are. So there have been people who've come back to say the FBI came, which they did. The FBI did get in on this case. And they'll say, the FBI knows things that we don't know. Of course they do. They're the FBI, like they should. The same accounts will say things like, sadly, one of the leads on this case a few years later committed suicide. Like, what did he go to the grave with? Well, who knows what he went to the grave with? Many years of being in some sort of a law enforcement job. And who knows? We don't know. I don't know anything about his personal life. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it screams that he's holding on to some information about Dennis Martin.
It would be in his report. I mean, whatever he did. Is that what we're saying?
Oh, well, they're saying that maybe he did something we didn't know, and he's holding on to this information. Like, I'm saying, then like the same account will say things like that the Green Berets worked solely by themselves and would not fraternize with the volunteers and were heavily armed. I'm like, well, of course, all of those things. Like, why would they walk with the Boy Scouts, and why wouldn't they be armed if they had already been on a training mission? So just keep those things in mind when you hear people kind of try to make something a bit more colorful sometimes than it is. So it was, like I said, a very, very huge search, and they worked into the night, the next day, the next night, the next day for this child. So I believe somewhere it said at the time the total until they closed the search would have been back then around $50,000 in cost for the search, which would equate now to around like $415,000, $420,000 on a search. And honestly, I could make all of those numbers. I didn't make those numbers up, but I could, because I really don't know what a search actually costs, generally speaking. So the numbers started dwindling after around June 21st. So this would have been about a week or so after he initially went missing. Finally, they ended it in September. The searchers had logged like 13,000, almost 13,500 man hours. There were helicopters that had spent over 200 hours in the air. everyone kept feeling that he would be found the next hour or the next day. In fact, one of the very sad days was the day that was actually Dennis's birthday during the search, and he was turning 7. So finally in September, officially, the search for Dennis was called off. This would have been 3 months after he went missing. But even one of the leads will say, like, there were so many he said, quote, there were so many footprints, a mass confusion of footprints. Like, there's no way to find this small child's footprints if he were anywhere where they were looking after all of that. So evidently, several days into the search, there were 2 men from Townsend. Now, Townsend is like a local town there. It would have just been within an hour of kind of where they were. Noticed a shoe print near the west prong of the Pigeon River. It was the size of a child's, like an Oxford type shoe, which evidently that's what Dennis Martin had been wearing when he went missing. But evidently McCarter said that this lead was not fully followed up on because searchers had already been in the area. So they're saying, oh, we already looked in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's kind of some of that here. It's not like mishandling or like gross negligence, but there are just some leads that weren't really kind of followed up on, and I don't know what they could have done with that footprint anyway. But.
Well, right. If you're looking for someone who is not dead, then, and you search an area on Monday, when you come back on Tuesday, you're searching a different area. And people will go, oh, we've already searched that on Monday. Well, if this person is still moving and lost in the woods,
they might
come right back. It's like in
that's why you tell a child to stay still, right? That's the whole reason for this exact reason. So you're not going in circles chasing
like a state fair or something when a kid gets lost. Like legitimately, you're looking for kids. Like as patrol officer, you work state fair. You're looking for kids, and it's like, well, the kid's moving. We all are moving as well. You know what I mean? Like, so when they say, "Oh, we've already searched that area," that kid may
now if we have what looks like his footprint, right, or potentially his shoe print.
Yeah.
So he will say, the investigator McCarter will say later, he was the one who said that they had come to him with that shoe print, that footprint, and he says later he was just 24 years old at the time. He was still learning from senior rangers. I think he was actually, I keep saying investigator. I think he was a park ranger. He was starting to learn, and he was very new at this. So he just kind of did what he knew to do based on what they said. And he'll say now, today, as an older man who's now been in the business for a long time, 2 things he most wished would have happened were massive searches of the area where the print was found. And of the Sea Branch area where they think where the one man said that he might have heard a scream and that rough looking man had been seen. So he really wishes they'd followed up on that stuff a lot more. But again, he was 24 years old at the time and just kind of really doing what he knew. He actually says now that Sea Branch area where that Howard K., the guy who was a traveler, that heard the scream and saw kind of the woolly looking man, says that actually that's downhill of where Dennis was last seen, and it is possible for a physically fit enough man to carry a small boy like that between the 2 points. And he says actually even more significantly that Dennis could have reached that spot alone on his own by that time. So now we have this one's interesting. So a few years after Dennis was last seen, and then we're about to probably, I think, pretty soon wrap up and get to our next case. But a few years after Dennis was last seen, a man came across skeletal remains of a small child in Tremont's Big Hollow. Yeah, okay. Well, let's just keep talking about it. So the bones actually, he will say, included the skull and were already starting to be scattered by animals when he saw them. So again, this was a few years after Dennis went missing. This man says he sees this small, what looks like the remains of a small human child, remains starting to be spread, but a skull was present. He didn't tell anyone, though, for years, because evidently he was hunting ginseng. If you don't know hunting ginseng, you're going to get that root. It's, it's something that people do, but it's widely known that it's illegal to do so. The TWRA, the wildlife resource agency. Like, you will get, jammed up, fined up, if not some jail time. So again, still not the same as finding a small skeleton of potentially a child. But evidently he fears that he would be prosecuted, so he didn't tell anyone. I can't, that one puts a bad taste in my mouth. Like, dude, you were hunting ginseng. So, already, whatever.
Or, like we've said in the past, do you have to admit you're looking for ginseng?
Right. Just be like, I found this that I was hiking.
Yeah, I read Walden or whatever. Was it Walden Pond or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know.
Thoreau, and I wanted to get out.
Now, look, there has been a lot of stock put in this guy over the years when people kind of go back and look back at this story. If I'm not mistaken, I think a reward on the whereabouts of his location or whatever had not long before he comes to authorities been announced. And he goes to authorities. I believe he went to authorities in 1985. Let's see here. Yep, in 1985. So Dennis went missing in 1969. A few years later, I'm not sure when, it was just a few, 3, 4, 5 years later, he says he sees these skeletal remains. So not until 1985. So you're looking at almost 16 years later, he contacted McCarter, that ranger, right? He knew him personally, and he told him about the skeleton. So evidently McCarter and 30 volunteer rescue squadsmen searched the area but found nothing. Well, because now it's been many years, and his story says that, remember, when he first found it, they were already starting to be scattered, which is an interesting detail, right? So when they come back, they find nothing. And the thought obviously was that by this time animals would have fully destroyed and scattered the remains. This area is about 3 to 3.5 miles downhill from where Dennis was last seen, and in the same direction as the Oxford shoe print found by the other person. It would be about 9 miles from where the scream and potential unkempt man were reported. I just have a hard time thinking that somebody finds the remains of of any human.
Yeah.
This is not something you find. I think because the skull, if he just saw a couple, a femur or a whatever, maybe he wouldn't know, or even maybe a partial rib cage, you may not fully. I mean, I would think you would, but maybe not. Yeah. But a skull, I mean, of a 6-year-old, it's going to be a small skull.
Yeah. There's nothing else indigenous in that area with a skull like that.
You mean apes?
Yeah, that sounded kind of dumb. I thought it sounded good because I said indigenous.
Yeah. Well, I had to think of what would have a skull like that. So I guess like a primate or something.
That's the only thing I think. But they don't hang out there.
Yeah, there are no baby gorillas in Cades Cove. It'd be cool though. So excuse me. So basically, that's kind of it. I mean, they covered 56 square miles looking for him. Like I said, 1,400 searchers. They quit that immediate search on June 29th, and it was officially closed on September 14th. But the saying, or the talk is also that had the scream and the white car and the unkempt man been followed up on, had that potentially been viable, then this would be, an abduction case. This would be looked at and followed through with and research or, investigated very differently than a missing persons case. Yes?
100%.
Did you want to talk on that at all?
Well, you always look at, did someone just wander off in the woods and completely get lost? Or was there someone close by? Where the wires will cross or where their paths will cross, where someone who would want to abduct somebody would then see them in the woods.
Right.
Then the argument goes, well, if you're looking to abduct someone, the woods or a national park or greenways throughout cities are absolutely utilized. Yeah. A lot, sadly, because when you're on a greenway, you're completely isolated. Yeah.
So. And I think that I used to take my boys on hikes and stuff, and I wasn't scared of black bears. And in fact, even the rangers and stuff talk about that here, because people say, well, a bear could have gotten him. Yeah, I mean, a bear could have gotten him. I'm not saying it wouldn't. This isn't the West Coast. This isn't the Rockies. This isn't grizzly bears. These are black bears. They're kind of like quiet little scared dogs. They literally will run away. They tree their cubs, the moms do, and run away. Like, so they don't really have this aggressive attack mode necessarily. In saying that, obviously cats can and do and will stalk. So my concern when I would take my children, especially when the youngest was little, would be the idea of a large cat that's mounted. They'll perch up above you on big rocks above you and just wait and stalk, just like house cats do. And they wait and stalk, and they'll find the weakest link. So that obviously would be an option. I think if that happened, though, it's going to take him and go, but it's not going to take him and go 40 miles. Okay. So I just feel like we'd find a shoe that fell off of him as he's being drugged, or remnants of his jacket or his little red shirt. Like, don't you think that it would be much more likely with all of those people and all of that searching? They may have muddied and muddled the footprints, but, clothing or anything would be left.
Yeah, 40 miles is a whole lot of...
56. They covered 56.
No, I'm sorry.
I use that as a general reference, but I'm saying they covered 56 square miles. So, like, a cat's going to grab him and run for a little bit to kind of go back to hunker down and eat him, but it's not going to grab him and run outside of their scope of search.
Yeah. Like a whole nother city. That's like running from...
that's what I'm saying. Like, so don't you think if it were an animal situation, when you're talking about searching for missing people, like... that we'd have remnants of something.
Yeah, I would assume so. At some point.
That's the only reason the animal one seems less likely to me. The only other thing I was terribly afraid of, other than just like somebody rolling an ankle or like really breaking something and having to carry them back because you don't have cell phone service, would be, if not big cats, then humans. And there are a lot of interesting folks that kind of like you were saying, that know exactly what they're doing when they go to an area like that, and know how much you can get away with and how little anyone is going to know of what you do. So if that were the case, though, again, if it were a human, I think that we are looking at abduction, much more so than, a crime committed there and the adult leave on their own. But then that could play toward the man who is running toward his car, right? I don't know. Okay, so that's the big one. And then we're going to cover 2 or 3 other kind of interesting ones before we wrap it up. But that's the big one. We've talked about that in season 1. I covered that one. And it always just blows my mind, because when you go back to the root of it, they were just playing a prank on the adults. So it was a very quick hide behind the bushes, jump out, and surprise the adults. And the other 3 kids did, and Dennis did not. So in that amount of time... and the idea behind the abduction theory would be that potentially this person enticed him, had him kind of wander away. Potentially it had been someone already, maybe having an eye on the fact that there are multiple little boys running around here. And then once he was kind of alone, once he got, kind of separated from the other boys, it would have been too easy in that sense. And we all know, guys, if you've been with your kids to a mall, to a park, whatever, I mean, you turn your head for 1 second, they get distracted by a bunny or whatever, they turn one corner, meaning he rounds one brush row or, line of trees, and it's like, gone so fast. All right, so we're going to move on to the Jared Adadaro case. So in October of 1999, it was a Saturday, actually, in Colorado. So in the mountains of Colorado, you've got Alan Adadaro and his kids, Jared and Jocelyn. Jared, like I said, was 3 years old at the time. Okay, guys. So 3-year-old Jared Adadaro. So they were in the Padre River Resort. And it was actually like this little resort camp area that actually Alan, the gentleman I just referenced, owned with his twin brother. So the kids were excited to go. They were going to be going to this fish hatchery that day. The dad and mom were no longer together. He had custody of the kids, and he had just joined this, or had been involved in this in the Christian Singles Network group or whatever. But I guess I mentioned that because I guess they all go and did a lot of excursions and hobbies and like weekend outings and stuff together, and would take the kids, like adults and kids would all just kind of hang out. They had all become a bunch of friends. So this day, like I said, they were going to the state fish hatchery. So at first, Alan didn't want Jared to go. Again, he was only 3. But they said that the other members in the group kind of convinced him, we're just going to go there and come back. It won't be too big of a day for him. And so he consented. So at that point, there were 11 members of that group, plus the siblings, Jocelyn and Jared. And they took an early afternoon hike up the Big South Trail. So this would be about 15 miles west of the resort. So evidently at some point, the group split into kind of like a faster group and a slower paced group. And it was an 11-mile trail. Now, that's a long way for a 3-year-old. If you don't have like a hiking backpack or you're not going to carry them, 11 miles is quite long, particularly depending on the terrain. They were in Colorado. So evidently they were around about 8,400 feet of elevation. It was the Comanche Peak Wilderness is where they were at this time. And evidently it crosses into the Rocky Mountain National Park. All right. So we're back in a park system, in a park area. So about a mile and a half up the trail, Jared started to run ahead of the group. Toddlers tend to do this. So he's starting to kind of go ahead of the group and come back. But evidently he continued to go ahead of the group, probably, I would venture to say, a bit farther than he should have been going. He actually stopped and spoke with 2 fishermen. They didn't think much about it. They said that they told investigators they saw a group go about 50 or 80 feet down the trail and saw him. And they said that he was walking, quote, rapidly up the trail adjacent to the Camp 2 sign. So evidently he thought these guys saw the other 2 groups and just thought that one or the other one had eyes on this little boy. So we don't really know if he had gotten ahead of the faster group or was between the 2 specifically at this time once he disappeared. But evidently some, more than one, of the 11-person hiking party reported hearing a scream. This is in the investigation report. So Jocelyn, who is Jared's sister, told her dad she did too. And so when she was asked what kind of scream it was, she said, I don't know, like somebody getting attacked or somebody playing with someone, kind of like a playful scream, like someone was going to tag him, like a tag scream. So they realize that Jared is missing. Some of the people in the group, they all start to look. Now, collectively, they all understand that they don't see. No one has eyes on this child. They search for him for about an hour. And at this time, 2 members of the group leave and return to the resort to tell Alan, his father. And I guess this is something that that's always kind of haunted me, because this is the title of a lot of stories in reference to Jared Adadaro. But evidently they said to him, you need to sit down. Something happened to Jared. And Alan will say that he asked them what happened. He thought maybe he had fallen down and gotten hurt. And they said, quote, he's okay. We just can't find him. Okay. And I think they're just trying to maybe lessen the blow a little bit. You know what I mean? Just kind of comfort him. Like, he's okay. We just can't find him. Mm-hmm. So evidently Dad, Alan, jumps in his car. He starts driving to the trailhead. He immediately is breaking down emotionally. So they say he's kind of beating his chest. He's yelling. He's crying. They lost my baby. They lost my baby. He runs all the way up the trail, quickly realizes he's not going to find Jared all alone. So they get the resort manager to call the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. Evidently the manager had heard all the commotion and had already made this call. So a sheriff's deputy and a Larimer County search and rescue member gets there, and they quickly are followed by more employees of each one of those organizations. So Jocelyn, the sister, who she's now grown and married, she just says that she does remember she says she doesn't remember a whole lot about her childhood, but she does remember when her dad returned from the trail without Jared. And just, of course, how that played on her as the years went by. But evidently Nelson was this guy, one of the investigators on it, right? He was actually a retired, let me see here. I want to make sure I'm telling you exactly who he was, because I believe he was no longer working in that capacity. Yes, he was a recently retired undersheriff with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. And so he came to help. And he said he went to his vehicle to nap just before midnight. Like, he had kind of gone out with them for a while. He went to take a little nap before midnight and told them to make sure to wake him up whenever they found the boy. But evidently he stayed asleep the entire evening, and the next day woke up in his car and immediately was obviously kind of in a panic and concerned, in the sense that he realizes they must not have found this child overnight. So they continue to search. So then this one gets a little weird, because evidently Alan and Jocelyn start hearing the sound of a propeller, right? So they're hearing the whoosh whoosh of a search helicopter making its way up the canyon, and they actually have this like small sense of relief, like this hope that now from that vantage point, maybe little Jared's going to finally be found. So Alan will say, quote, "I remember saying to Jocelyn, look, there's the helicopter. They're going to find your brother. And we watched it fly over us." But it was a Huey, and it was from F.E. Warren Air Force Base out of Cheyenne. And so it was going to the Fort Collins airport to refuel, right? So when it comes back, now it's loaded down with a full fuel tank, and now it struggles with the fuel load, and there were some conditions in the mountains that were not ideal. And so evidently it stalls out and falls over 100 feet, crashing up the Big South Trail. There were 4 members aboard of the Air Force, and this guy, Mark Sheets, who was a Loveland resident and a search and rescue member. Sheets was not supposed to be on that flight, but he had relieved his manager from his shift. So he went to help make like ground search plans. All right. So Sheets was 57 years old. He says later, he goes on and works with them for a long time and eventually retires. And he will say later that, "I said on the intercom that we needed altitude now. And I remember the co-pilot saying, 'I know, but I can't. We're going in.'" He said, and to me, that was code for brace for impact. So evidently Sheets, this guy, since the rest of them were in the Air Force, he was the only one that was not actually in a seat. He was on the floor with the door open. And he said he saw the rotors hit the tops of trees and pieces of helicopter sprayed into the forest. He said he was trying at this time to feverishly shut the door, but a severed tree limb came through, struck the Air Force doctor on board, which fractured the doctor's eye socket. Sheets said that the helicopter continued to disintegrate as it's going down. The fuselage split into 3 pieces. It crashed like basically across this trail. The jet engines, evidently, this has got to be eerie, were still operational, and evidently they roared for hours until the fuel ran out after it landed. Air Force was able to get out of the helicopter, but Sheets, the search and rescue guy, was actually trapped. Okay. So nearby search and rescue members came down to the helicopter, kicked in a window. They were able to get Sheets out. He was unconscious at this point. He didn't wear a helmet that day so that he could wear a headset to communicate with the pilot. And because of this, he suffered a pretty severe concussion. He had what they say was a 13-inch L-shaped gash that left his femur quite open and exposed. Broke his back, broke his shoulder. Anyway, he survived, but he was obviously pretty wounded at the time. Spent a few days in the hospital, and all he wanted to do was hear positive word for Jared. After all, he was, not that the Air Force guys didn't care, but this guy at heart was a search and rescue guy. And so that's what he had gone there to do. He said he was angry because he really just wanted to be doing something useful, but there he was in a hospital bed. And so the media gets there, TV trucks, newspaper reporters, and evidently they're beginning to swarm the site because this was after the grand jury in another child case, JonBenet, that was happening in Boulder. Remember, we're in Colorado for this case. So the grand jury had postponed its announcement of whether or not it would hand down indictments in the JonBenet case, which we learn. Spoiler, they didn't. So the perfect storm was brewing. Anyway, they realized it was just almost too much. They've not found hide nor hair of this child. They say emotionally, as you can imagine, it was incredibly overwhelming. They have TV satellite trucks. At one point, there were 17 of them at one time lined up along the highway. They have anchors and fur coats. This seemed to, as you can imagine, just kind of not sit well. So, quote, anchors and fur coats were walking around, and anybody and everybody was calling us for information. So at this point, it's becoming an international incident. Okay, so now news stories across the country are covering it. There are a lot of different theories, kind of the same with Dennis, right? Like that he had fallen behind boulders, maybe a predator had gotten him, maybe abduction. So Alan will just say that this was the biggest storm of my entire life, as you can imagine. He kept hearing all these other people's ideas of what might have happened to his son. But it got tense. It got tense between family and the searchers, and so he actually tried to distance himself from that for a little while. So Alan is kind of in the camp that he really thinks his son had been abducted. And he says that because he was like, because we couldn't find him. And we had a lot of searchers out there, and he really thinks that they would have been able to. I mean, we know that could go either way. Just because he wasn't found doesn't mean he wasn't there. But either way, they start looking into more of the idea of the abduction. So they question everyone in the group, everyone, the fishermen, anyone at the hatchery, anyone that was there that day. There were no red flags. People start talking conspiracy theories. We're going to talk about some of the more wazoo takes that people have at the end of the show. But there's only one way, evidently, that's kind of plausible. I mean, there's multiple ways out of it, but really there's only kind of one true way out of the narrow canyon, and that would be back down the trail. So it sounds like a linear kind of system they've got there. So on the day of his disappearance, one of the first searchers quickly hiked up, to where the trail was covered in snow, and he said he saw no tracks. And so he's saying that, like, if you hiked out of either side of that, it would require a climb of 1,000 to 2,000 feet vertically through thick trees and down logs on a 45-degree slope. So that's why they're saying for this 3-year-old, it would be much more likely that he came or went on that same trail if he were on, with his own 2 feet, up and down that like that. And there, like I said, no footprints in freshly fallen snow. Okay. So there's the mountain lion attack. That theory kind of became a prevailing thought as time went on. But because they recently around that area had a couple of people killed by mountain lions. Like, I say around that time, like within a few years of that time. So they finally have to kind of start shutting things down, right? Like they can't find him, nothing. So let me go on and get you the picture of what eventually is found, though. So years go by, there are hoaxes. People are saying they saw him. People are saying they are. It's just, people do some really bad things. So there was a woman who evidently repeatedly and falsely claimed that she knew the woman who abducted him. None of this checked out. They pursued it fully. None of it checked out. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So on June 4th of 2003, so this would be about 4 years later, almost to the day, there was a Fort Collins businessman and hiking partner, this guy named Gary Watts and a guy named Rob Osborne. And they were hiking off trail in that Big South Trail area. So that's where he had gone missing. And they stumbled upon a white Tarzan tennis shoe. And this would have been about 500 vertical feet above the trail. Okay. So they found that. Then they find the other shoe. They find a brown fleece jacket, blue sweatpants. Now, the sweatpants were turned inside out. And it says that one pant leg was mostly scattered by birds using the material in their nest. So rather than like an animal bite and like pull, it looked like threads had been pulled the way that birds will do. Yeah. So let me see here. I'm going to show you what that looked like. So this is what they found.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So those pants are inside out. Those are his shoes. Now, remember, please, that this was about 4 years later, almost exactly 4 years later. Those shoes look pretty good to have been in a national park with snow, rain, everything else. Like the white is white from here.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I mean, it looks like a big old bite mark out of the side of the pants leg. But I'm assuming that could be one of the holes or whatever that the.
It does to me too. And this is really the only picture that circulates of this, so it's hard to know for sure, but I've always only read, and I covered this the first time too, about threading. Yeah. So I don't know, like, obviously one pants leg is fully missing. So, yeah. I mean, a bird's not making that nest. So, you know, I don't know. Now it looks, I don't know. I was going to say torn clean off, but I don't know. But they are fully inside out. But those shoes are white. I don't know. It's kind of bizarre. So they knew immediately what they discovered because these were locals. And so they remembered the case of this child. This had been, widely reported in the media. So they found, they said that they were up there, or excuse me, this is where it gets a little weird. They say, quote, "The thing is, we were up there a week earlier and we talked quite a bit about the various scenarios about his disappearance," said one of those men. Mm-hmm. And then we happened upon his clothes. It's mystery solved. He said it was the most bizarre thing. Once we saw the clothes, I knew exactly what happened to him. A mountain lion killed him. We felt that finding the items would hopefully bring some closure to the family. That would make more sense when you see that ripped leg. Yeah. Or the pants leg. Mm-hmm. So evidently they photographed the area and the clothing as they found it. They turned a bread bag inside out and took the fleece jacket and a shoe with them to the sheriff's office the next day. It took searchers about an hour to reach that site where they found the remaining clothing, and they were scattered across a 25-foot area. Some of the items were sheltered from the elements. Some were exposed. I don't care how sheltered, though. You can't be so sheltered that in 4 years... I mean, I guess you could if you're kind of in like a cave. I don't know. I'm just thinking about those shoes not looking dirty. Mm-hmm. So it says that the cloth jacket had what appeared to be puncture marks and the pants were tattered. 11 days later, just before Father's Day, searchers did find a molar and part of his skull. Mm. This was confirmed by DNA. So, you know, I think that with his clothing being ripped like that, the inside out is the part that was always kind of weird for people, I think. Yeah. It's not like the cat needs to take the PJ pants off. I don't know. That's super weird. It's also weird that like the skull, it was a large chunk of his skull. So cats aren't often going, I'm not saying it won't grab his head, but it's not eating his skull. Usually speaking, the cats are going to go for the soft, like the belly, like the organs, like, and it's least resistance. So it makes sense that that's where they'd go rather than being like chomping on a skull. So even if another animal came in after the fact,
you're thinking that seems more man-made or
well, it just seems weird that that his skull would be, I've seen the piece of his skull. It's just a large skull cap like section. Unless, you know, in an attack from an animal or whatever, or maybe he alone fell off of something. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't break off just one chunk. I don't know. That's the part that's kind of weird to me. I mean, I guess it could be multiple things, but I don't know. This is one that they go back to a lot of times to say things like, obviously, had the helicopter not crashed, they would have searched a larger area. Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of like a if this, if that. I don't know. Fun fact though, the dad keeps that piece of his skull on top of his toys on his dresser.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah. And he'll say, you know, people think it's strange, but that that's the only thing he has of him. So well, what do you do? All right, let's make this quick. You know what? I'm not even going to do that one. I am going to do this, though, because it's short and it's super weird. So if you're still hanging in there, guys, I know night shift's running kind of late. So check this out.
It's running into the night.
It's overtime. So evidently in 1946, this would be the Ozark St. Francis National Forest, okay? So 8-year-old Catherine Van Alst was playing with her siblings in the woods near a campsite. Her brothers looked away for a moment, just like we've been talking about, right? And suddenly she was gone. So her story gets super strange. So a huge search is launched. They cover every mile of forest. It's redundant from what we've just said. But look, they find nothing. They find no sign of her, no clothing, no evidence, nothing until about 6 days later. So I would assume that hope is starting to wane thin. She's 8 years old. It's been 6 days. Volunteers wander by a cave 30 miles from where Catherine went missing. Out crawls little Catherine, who evidently was pretty casual when she waved and said, "Here I am."
You said 6 days later?
6 days and 30 miles.
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay.
Got my attention.
She says, "Here I am." So evidently she has little memory of the last 6 days. She said that she ate berries. She said she drank water from the cave. They say that she made some kind of odd remarks about sleeping in warm grass and, quote, finding herself in the cave. And she always seemed like strangely calm about her ordeal. And she's 8. Like, 8 is old enough to be terrified. So the search and rescue teams were very confused because, but we just talked about this with children, they had searched that exact area with equipment and with dogs twice before. They got a rare happy ending, but that's it. Like, that's that case.
And what year was that again?
1946.
Okay.
I feel like I should say 1946.
1946.
Yep.
There I was.
There I was.
December 7th.
Right. Isn't that crazy?
Do you think? Okay, for 6 days she was in the woods. I'm gonna assume
30 miles.
Dirty. You know what I mean? What she would look like. Do you think that could have been like one of the first like hoax or stunts that a family would do or something? Like the hot air. Remember the hot air balloon boy?
Yeah, I mean,
the only reason I just thought about that, like, okay, for 6 days, she's just hanging out in the woods at 8 years old.
They're putting a lot of trust that kid's gonna continue with that for the rest of her life, because she did. I mean, like, it's never been different.
Okay, that's crazy. You said 30 miles away too, right? So not even like.
Say what?
Away? You said about 30 miles away?
Yeah, 30. Silly in the chat just said no, she wasn't alone. Like, I'm with you there. That's the thing. But she doesn't remember a lot either, right? So would that be shock, or had she been given something? Like, had she been drugged? She doesn't mention another person at all. But maybe that's because she had been chloroformed.
The old memory may have been.
Maybe it was alien. So that's the thing. The theories that people have on some of these cases I just referenced, aside from the middle child, Jared, this one, the Dennis Martin case, and the case of this man named Thomas Mesnick, who was an 82-year-old, a dude who grew up in the woods, a war veteran, very well versed in his rifle. He was a hunter, and he had gone, it was in New York, in fact, and he had gone with his family hunting. At this point, he and another older gentleman had taken the ranks of kind of sitting on a tree stump out in this field and letting the younger folks go in and like flushing out the animals, and he'd kind of sit there and shoot them because he's 82 now. He couldn't get around in the woods as well. But they all go in the woods at this day, and he's sitting on this tree stump. They had done this a million times before. He had a walkie-talkie, a Snickers, and a rifle. Like, he was good. And that was it. And then they come back with in the prescribed time, and he's gone. And when I say gone, gone, never to be found. Nothing ever to be found. His friends will say that he was such an avid outdoorsman and, familiar with the woods that had he, let's say that he started to wander off, or maybe he went to use the restroom or something like that, right? That if he'd hurt himself or found himself injured in any way, he would have tied off a piece of his shirt on a tree. Like, he knew all these things, and his companions knew him as well too. Like, they knew he would do these things. So between that case, the one I just told you, and Dennis Martin, you'll get people talking about opening portals to other dimensions, this cross-dimensional portal theory. There's like a containment theory. That's a whole separate thing. Of course, aliens. People need that to be true.
I'd put a little money on that. No, I would. I mean, the older I get, the more there are things that I don't know. And
that's true. I agree with that.
I feel like it would make sense. Like if aliens came here, they wouldn't just land and be like, "Hey, how y'all doing?" So if they were here studying us, they could study us from the woods, the ocean. I don't know about the city.
Well, this is instructions on how to open a portal to another dimension. If you need nighttime reading.
I'm being serious, though. I don't know.
One of the most common ways. Well, one of the most common ways is through a wormhole.
Well, where do we get one of those?
Well, it's a hypothetical shortcut through the space-time continuum that connects two distant points in the universe. It's just the theory of relativity.
Okay.
All right, so just don't.
Yeah. I would put money on aliens.
I think that if you think that's too far-fetched, the wormhole, I understand that. Really, the other way to open the portal is through the use of a device called a Stargate. So that's going to be circular or rectangular. It's a structure that can generate a stable wormhole when activated.
So then, yeah. Do you know about Stargate?
Don't.
I'm not. It was a Kurt Russell movie. It was no Snake Plissken's, so I didn't like it.
It actually references that right here.
Of course it does. That's exactly where they probably made it up from. I'm
or Outlander does that.
What's that now?
That's what we were talking about. The show Outlander kind of has that idea. Like she kind of goes back and forth and like from one country in one decade, like one era or century, I should say, to a different area or different part of the world in a different century. But you've got to hit this like structure, that Stargate thing, like just right.
Oh, cool.
You never watched it, I know.
Sorry. But I think like with aliens though, I think there's some extra like missing people and missing dates and times, and it would make sense. And that aliens aliens are from different planets. So when people are like, why does everybody describe the aliens the exact same? Because they're probably from different planets. Huh. And some are probably trained and schooled in water, and others are trained and schooled in mountains and mountain terrain. That's all. That's all I got there.
Do you know how much I like aliens?
Oh, I know you could care less. Like one day we're gonna meet them. We're gonna meet them. Like when we're just sitting out in the ocean,
and I'll be like, "Cool."
And you'll be like, "Cool." So there's your aliens.
So anyway,
let's talk about current swell.
Yeah, like, I don't care at all.
I know.
All right, I'm gonna show y'all a couple of pictures before we wrap it up here of the kiddos. I meant to do it earlier when I was talking. Of course, I'll put all these pictures on Andrea Up Late on the Instagram page. This is the gentleman who went missing that I just spoke about, Thomas Messick. I feel like that's blurry. Is that blurry?
It is.
This one. At this point, he had one eye, so those pictures are a little. He looks like he's being silly, but there's a lot of. Let's see here. No, not that. That's not him. Here he is. This is a good picture of Thomas. But anyway, poof, up and disappeared. This is Jared, the one whose little clothes we were just looking at. That's little Jared Adadero. Those are the clothes I showed you. This is Jared and his dad. And here's the original case we talked about, Dennis Martin. This is little Dennis. This was taken right around the time they went on that trip, in fact. This shows on the right a bit of some of the search efforts underway. This is a map of the area they were in. It shows Gatlinburg, Knoxville, kind of the direction you're in there. Cherokee is there. Man. Park incident. Look at that, how they word it in the newspaper. It's interesting, I think.
Yeah.
All right.
It does make you wonder what some of the original reports would have read.
Mm-hmm.
The police reports, or whatever, some of the interviews and stuff they did, or just their impression, of what was going on. But
yeah, huge. So before we wrap it up tonight, I've got stickers right now for Nightshift. So you guys, it's kind of a fun, if you haven't seen them, I think I pinned them to the top of my post on Instagram, but either way, shoot me a message if you want. I'll send those out to you. You can even comment here on YouTube and I'll see that as well. But basically you just send out your Venmo. They're $4 and it's free shipping. So you'll just pay $4. You get a sticker in the mail. And it's just, I think they're super cute. They're a lot of fun. They're the kind of the Nirvana, like smiley that's yellow on a black background, and not Nirvana. That would be copyrighted. Nightshift is written in like that Nirvana font over top of it. So they're super cute stickers. Anyway, like I said, $4, free shipping. You'll get some stickers. You want them for your water bottles and your computers and your trapper keepers. Like, just get them. You want them for everything, don't you?
Did you collect stickers? Like, do you remember?
I collected the smelly stickers.
Yeah, scratch and sniff stickers. Yes. For some reason, at a certain time, and it was only like maybe a year, it felt like, girls in like 3rd grade or something, 4th grade, collected stickers, and they had them in photo albums. And
now
I
know what you're talking about. I didn't. I had baseball cards in albums. I didn't have my stickers in albums, but we did trade them in like I had a lot of like scratch and sniff stickers. Yeah. I just didn't have them organized properly.
Yeah.
Same.
I don't know.
Nothing's really changed in my life. Yeah.
It's like just sticker. Like the teachers had stickers.
Yeah.
These girls would be like fiending for stickers.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you have like a little pile of stickers in your pocket and you could be like, "Hey Sally." No. Hey Betty Sue.
No,
did you grow up in 1956? What are these names?
I don't know.
Hey Betty Sue. Come here, Doris. Get your scratch and sniff.
Yeah. For like a nickel, we were going to go to
the malt. Get a malt.
No, I had Garbage Pail Kids though.
Oh, definitely.
A lot of Garbage Pail Kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We would stick them on stuff, and then we kind of realized we weren't supposed to do that.
The Garbage Pail Kids?
Yeah, because they were stickers. But we were peeling them off and sticking them all over everything, and then all of a sudden
I had the cards, I think, right?
They were cards, yeah. But if you bend it, they're stickers.
Oh yeah.
Or at least maybe the first year or 2 or 7.
Yeah, when I came around, they were just cards.
Yeah, like 12 years later,
something like that.
Also, just tell everybody to go watch the Garbage Pail Kids movie.
No,
like 1986, I think. It's an incredible movie.
Hey, Deanna said she's still waiting on her stickers. Yes, you are, because I was going to get cute little envelopes to send them in, and now I think I'm just not. So you will get your stickers. They just may not be in a cute envelope. So thank you to those who have already purchased those. I totally appreciate that. And we'll come out with some more. I've got a couple other little designs sitting around. I like stickers. Yes. They're fun. Definitely we'll do some t-shirts again soon. But stickers and like koozies, hats, those are kind of fun and just cheap and easy. So $4, free shipping again. Buy a sticker. Also, if you're going to pump money into anything right now that we recommend, I would love for my computer to work so I can show you. If you haven't seen on Instagram, we have these shirts for sale. So bear with me when I kind of explain. There are t-shirts and tank tops. When you go to Minor League Studios, go see our buddy Bill. Tell him we sent you. Go to minorleaguestudios.com. When you do, you hit the shop tab, right? And you'll see Andrea Uplate. You'll also see a picture of these shirts. They're called the You Did shirts, okay? When you click on that, it's one link. But if you keep scrolling, you will see the option for all the options for tees and tanks. So you can get either. Some people are asking me because it looks like there's only one left and it's only one tee. It's because he makes them on demand. So as you are ordering them, he is making what you order. So you can either they come in black or white, tee or tank, and you can get either like a neon pink or like an electric blue writing. Mm-hmm. On the black or the white tee or tank. So however you want to do that for yourselves. On the front, they say it's in the logo or in the idea, right? The vein of we know what you did last summer, but it says we know what you did that summer. On the back of them, very small, it says hashtag justice for Grant. And then I believe it says Nightshift with Andrea plate, very small across the back of them. These are fundraising shirts. So we don't see a dime of the money for these. Okay. So 100% of the proceeds for these shirts go to the Justice for Grant, Freedom for Gracie foundations. If you know, you'll understand these shirts. Go back and listen to the Grant Solomon case, episodes 1, 2, and 3. That, again, I say it every week. It may not be something you're hearing about a lot from at least from us right now, but that does not mean that a lot is not happening. So they are very well still full in the full in it over there. Okay. And so you've heard Angie, if you listen to our show, that's Grant's mother. You've heard the case, and please go, like I said, grab one of those shirts. I'm definitely getting a tank. The tees are the next level tees. So they're super soft, like form fitting in like a good way, unisex. So like meaning men or women like them. We both like them to be fitted as a man's or woman's shirt. And it's not like any fundraising shirt that you usually see. It's not like boxy and weird. And I don't know. It's a pretty cool shirt, I'll have to say. So I'm definitely going to grab a couple of the tanks and tees. And again, all of those proceeds go to Angie's cause, the Justice for Grant and Freedom for Gracie. So again, please take a look at those. And you guys we really appreciate you. So things are, it's just a lot of fun with y'all, and we appreciate it. So please go on and continue to hit like and rate and review. We really do appreciate it. It makes a difference. And if you haven't subscribed to YouTube, it's interesting because it'll show all like the numbers of people who watch and listen to stuff, but then the numbers, all you have to do is hit the button and it's free. You know what I'm saying? So like there's a disparity there. Also go over and follow BC Sanders. You can follow him by that name. You can follow the Disruptors podcast with BC and Ski on Instagram. That's the same name for the YouTube channel that he's got. He's putting out shows just about every week. You can also go to the website, The Disruptors Podcast with Brian Sanders.
Almost. The Disruptors with Brian Sanders.
That's it. Shouldn't be podcast. The Disruptors with Brian Sanders.com. The Disruptors with Brian Sanders.com. If you go there, you'll see what he's up to. So whenever he talks about his classes and his trainings and things like that, he's made it super easy. One-stop shop. You can go to his website, read what he's got going on. You can buy merch from there. You can click literally on what class you want to take of his and just pay it through the website and it's done. So that makes it super easy. It's a really cool website he's got up and running now. So definitely check that out. And, we appreciate your support. So hope y'all have a good week. I hope everything's going good for you guys. It's time. Summer's a-coming. So I'm super pumped. It's getting warm out, staying warm out. But I guess we'll wrap it up. Do you have anything I'm missing here?
I think that's it.
Is that gonna be all? I want like a late snack. I'm hungry.
I'm starving.
All right. Well, we really do appreciate y'all. So I guess until next time, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Night, y'all.